The defense is wrong.
Are you sure?
My Cousin Vinny is the greatest legal comedy of all time, and it also has one of the messiest casts I have ever seen. A murder case in Alabama, 2 New York guys getting arrested by mistake, and a lawyer who looks like a total joke stepping into the courtroom to save them. That is what makes this movie special. It is funny, but also so authentic to courtroom life that people in the legal field still talk about it to this day. But honestly, the case in the movie is nothing compared to the real lives of the cast. The most captivating woman in the film changed her life thanks to a Best Supporting Actress Oscar, only to be turned into a joke by Hollywood afterward. One powerful presence barely got to leave behind his final role before passing away from cancer. Another man, who seemed rock solid, ended up being taken down by ALS. So go ahead and watch this video to see what 34 years have really done to the faces who once walked out of that courtroom. Number 1, Joe Pesci as Vincent Vinny Gambini. The absolutely essential name in My Cousin Vinny is Joe Pesci, because without him, this movie simply would not work the way people still remember it today. When the film came out in 1992, he was 49. This year he is 83. And let's just say it straight. Joe Pesci stepped into Vincent Gambini not like an actor who needed a big break, but like a guy who already had real screen power after Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Home Alone, and even an Oscar for Goodfellas. Joe Pesci's career path was not exactly a smooth one either. The biggest public collision came in 2011 with the lawsuit around the movie Gotti. Reuters reported that he said he had been promised the role of Angelo Ruggiero for a $3 million salary, had gained about 30 pounds to get ready, then got moved to the smaller role of Anthony Gaspipe Casso for a whole lot less money. That was not just about missing out on a part. For somebody like Joe Pesci, that was a hit to professional honor, to trust between actor and producer, and to his own body, because he really did change his appearance for a promise that never came through. That is a big part of what makes Joe Pesci so interesting. He is not the kind of guy who complains in public, so when something like that gets pushed all the way into a lawsuit, it tells you just how mad he had to be. His private life also has one dark shadow that is hard to ignore. Joe Pesci was married to Claudia Harrow from 1988 to 1992, and they had a daughter together. Later on, Claudia Harrow got caught up in an attempted murder case involving her later husband and ended up in prison, according to reporting from the Daily Beast. This detail needs to be said carefully. That was not a scandal caused by Joe Pesci, but it still cast a very heavy shadow across his private life. But maybe what makes Joe Pesci such a unique figure in Hollywood is not the scandal stuff. It is the way he stepped away from the game. Britannica says he basically retired from acting in 1999 and only came back in stretches. Entertainment Weekly reported that to get him into The Irishman, Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro had to keep persuading him for years. The number people usually mention is around 40 invitations. Then, in 2025, director Rebecca Miller revealed that in the documentary project about Scorsese, the one person who said no to sitting down for an interview was Joe Pesci. That detail feels so Joe Pesci. He does not cling to the spotlight. He backs away from it. And because he backs away, his shadow somehow gets even bigger. Some actors disappear and get forgotten. Joe Pesci disappeared for a while, and every time he came back, all of Hollywood still had to turn and look. Number 2, Marisa Tomei as Mona Lisa Vito. Oh man, how could I possibly leave out this gorgeous name? Back then, I even used to joke with my friends, if you watched that movie and still did not fall for Marisa Tomei, then you do not have a heart left in you. When the movie came out in 1992, she was 28. This year, she is 62. Before My Cousin Vinny Tomei was not a major star yet. Then Mona Lisa Vito showed up, and everything changed. That role won her the Best Supporting Actress Oscar in 1993. That should have blown open the biggest door of her whole career. But Hollywood did exactly what it so often does to women. It gives you one glorious night that makes you spend years living under the shadow of that night. After that win, a nasty rumor stuck to Tomei for a long time, saying Jack Palance had read the wrong name and she was not the real winner. Even worse, that Oscar win did not immediately launch Tomei into major studio movies or top-tier leading lady status. She won a huge award, but she did not get handed the reward people always assume is supposed to come with it. Marisa Tomei figured out real quick what the price of one role being too successful could be. She deliberately stayed away from going deeper into comedy so she would not get locked into that one kind of part forever. Then as she got older, the cage just changed shape. People quoted her saying she truly regretted drifting into mother roles because that was not the path she thought she should have been on. That is the really bitter part of this story. It is not that she lacked talent. Hollywood was the one that kept seeing women too narrowly once they were no longer in their 20s. And still Tomei kept going, kept working, and came back with roles strong enough to earn 2 more Oscar nominations for In the Bedroom and The Wrestler. That is the best possible answer to everybody who ever said her 1993 win was just luck. Marisa Tomei's private life does not have tabloid-style explosions, no loud lawsuits, no messy divorces dragged across the press. But she still got watched closely just because she did not live by the old mold people like to force onto women. E had to shut down rumors that she was engaged to Logan Marshall Green and also repeated her own comments showing that Tomei is not somebody who believes marriage and children are required for a woman to be seen as complete. And that is exactly why Marisa Tomei is so admirable in one very simple way. She never let rumors age or Hollywood's habit of turning women into a joke define her. Number 3, Ralph Macchio as Bill Gambini. Ralph Macchio stepped into My Cousin Vinny, carrying the exact thing Hollywood loves to use and is also really good at using, to lock an actor in forever the oversized shadow of an old role. When the movie came out in 1992, he was 31. This year, he is 65. Before playing Bill Gambini, Macchio was already a face all of America recognized because of The Outsiders and especially The Karate Kid. The bitter part is that after a movie
30.
so loved for so
that's
long, Ralph
amazing
Macchio went into a dry stretch
that
in
you
his
really
career.
are youngish
He
looking.
himself later looked back and described those lean years as coming after My Cousin Vinny. Part of it was because the shadow of Daniel LaRusso hung on way too long. People looked at him and only saw that Karate Kid from the 1980s. But the part that makes me even more annoyed is something else. Macchio said people actually told him straight to his face that he needed a scandal, that he was too nice, too clean, not enough of an edge for Hollywood to find interesting. Honestly, that is where Hollywood really shows how twisted it can be. An actor who lives decently keeps it together, does not smash up his private life to get into the papers, does not turn himself into a mess for people to write headlines about. That should be something valuable. But to a lot of people there, it becomes almost worthless just because it does not sell gossip. To me, that is the most admirable thing about Ralph Macchio. Maybe that is exactly why he held up. Ralph Macchio has been married to Phyllis Fierro since 1987, has 2 children, and kept his family as a real solid anchor, while his career stayed thin for years. Then he came back with Cobra Kai, not like somebody clinging to nostalgia, but like a real comeback with dignity. In 2024, he got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. By 2025, he was even saying there had been talks about where a continuation of My Cousin Vinny could go. Some stars burn themselves out and disappear. Ralph Macchio did not do that. He went through a long, quiet stretch, kept himself intact, and came back through the very thing that had once almost trapped his whole career. That is a really rare life cycle in Hollywood, and with age, it only gets more impressive. Number 4, Mitchell Whitfield as Stan Rothenstein. Mitchell Whitfield is the kind of face anybody who has seen My Cousin Vinny remembers right away, even if not everybody gets the name right. In the movie, Stan Rothenstein is the friend traveling with Bill Gambini, and he is also half of the mistaken arrest that kicks off the whole story. When the film came out in 1992, Whitfield was 28. This year, he is 62. He was born in Brooklyn, and from the angle of early 1990s movies, he had exactly the kind of face that fit young, fast-talking, slightly panicked characters, but still felt real enough that the audience believed him right away. The problem is that My Cousin Vinny gave him a role people remembered for a long time, but it did not give him the leap into major stardom. And for a lot of actors, that is the kind of disappointment that lasts the longest. The biggest what if in Mitchell Whitfield's career sits with Friends. He told The Guardian that he was called in to audition for both Ross, and Chandler came back several times and got so far that people around him thought Ross was really his role. He got very deep into the process, almost to the final round, and then at the last minute, they brought one more guy in to read. That guy was David Schwimmer. Missing by one step like that can change an actor's whole life. That was not losing some ordinary part. That was losing one of the most defining TV roles of the 1990s. That is the part that is hard to hear without feeling sorry for Whitfield. He was so close to a door that could have changed everything. What matters is that Whitfield did not break. Public records about him mostly center on roles, family, and work, not loud scandals. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Tracy, and their 2 children, then quietly shifted over into voice acting. People noted that he carved out a place for himself there, and Variety confirmed that he voiced Fix-It in Transformers Robots in Disguise. That is not the glamorous road, but it is the road of somebody who does not quit. Just because luck did not pick his side, Mitchell Whitfield did not get the big explosion people once might have imagined for him. But he stayed, he kept working, and the more you think about it, the more it feels like a career worth respecting. Number 5. Fred Gwynne as Judge Chamberlain. Howler Fred Gwynne was the one man in My Cousin Vinny who could make Joe Pesci stop cold with nothing but a look. That is the level of presence he had as Judge Chamberlain Howler. When the movie came out in 1992, Gwynne was 66. And the sad part starts right there. This was also his final film role. Less than 16 months later, on July 2nd, 1993, Fred Gwynne died of cancer at 66. The bitterest part of Fred Gwynne's story is that Hollywood saw him way too narrowly for way too many years. Mainstream audiences remembered him first as Herman Munster from The Munsters, and sure, that role was huge. But Britannica says it very clearly: after that success, he got typecast. That is a very Hollywood kind of unfairness. They see one image that sells, then decide that is the whole person. And with Gwynne, that was especially wasteful because he was not just some giant guy in monster makeup. He had stage work, radio painting, children's books, and a voice and posture that could bring order to a scene the second he stepped into the frame. That's exactly why Judge Howler carries so much weight. Deseret News said it perfectly when it described him as a judge who looked strict on the outside but still had a sly, deeply human streak underneath. This role showed that Fred Gwynne was not just some television memory from the 1960s. He still had all the authority, all the rhythm, all the craft of a veteran actor. To put it plainly, My Cousin Vinny was the latest and most beautiful rebuttal possible to Hollywood's lazy way of looking at him. What makes people sad is that Fred Gwynne had just managed to remind audiences that he was far more than Herman Munster. And then time would not let him take another step. Some actors get swallowed whole by one old role for the rest of their lives. Fred Gwynne almost became one of them. Thankfully, before he left, he gave us Judge Howler as one last dignified reminder this man was never just one role. Number 6, Lane Smith as Jim Trotter III. Lane Smith was the kind of actor old Hollywood used to make really well and now almost feels extinct. The kind who walks into a movie and suddenly everything has order. In My Cousin Vinny, he played prosecutor Jim Trotter III. When the movie came out in 1992, Lane Smith was 56. He was born in 1936 in Memphis, Tennessee, and before becoming a familiar face on screen, he was already a seasoned stage actor who had studied at the Actors Studio and built a very solid Broadway foundation. What makes Lane Smith memorable is not that he had one great role and then lived off it forever. He was the kind of character actor who could bring authority into all kinds of different men. In movies, he could be Jim Trotter III, hard as steel. On television, he became Perry White in Lois and Clark, hot-tempered but still really charming, and that role made a whole lot of 1990s audiences remember him even more strongly. That is where Smith's skill really shows. He was not a poster star. He was the backbone a movie or a series needed in order to stand up straight. The part that really hurts comes at the end of his life. Lane Smith was diagnosed with ALS in April 2004, and just a little over a year later he died on June 13, 2005 at 69 from complications of the disease. For a man who lived through his voice, his rhythm, the weight of his gaze, and that incredibly steady way he carried himself, ALS is a cruel ending just to even think about. His death can be told in a very short sentence, but that shortness somehow makes it sadder. An actor so steady, so skilled, so dependable, taken way too fast. He left behind his wife, Debbie Benedict Smith, and his son, Robert, along with a legacy that anybody who watched American movies in the 1980s and 1990s has already seen, even if not everybody remembers the name right away. Number 7. Austin Pendleton as John Gibbons. Austin Pendleton played lawyer John Gibbons. When the movie came out in 1992, he was 52. This year he is 86. And behind that gentle face was a career that sure was not easy. Austin Pendleton grew up with a stutter. The strange thing is that very thing helped him land his first off-Broadway role because the character he auditioned for stuttered too. Sounds like one of those weird twists of fate, but for somebody in this business, it is real. Sometimes your very own crack is what opens the door for you. Then the business hit him with a really painful blow. In a conversation with the AV Club, Pendleton said he went through a disastrous theater season, going from being a praised actor in New York to getting torn apart in just 3 months. One review even told him to quit acting. He called that period a free fall. PBS preserved a moment where he referred to a complete nervous breakdown, then corrected himself, but just hearing that much tells you how hard the collapse really was. And the most painful part was that afterward, for years, he could barely get stage work in New York at all. What makes Austin Pendleton so admirable is that he did not disappear. He stayed. He kept acting, writing, directing, and teaching at HB Studio for decades. The New Yorker noted that he has been with his wife, Katina Cummings, for more than half a century and has kept working steadily even at a very advanced age. Number 8. Bruce McGill as Sheriff Dean Farley. There are actors who do not need to be in the center of a poster for people to remember them a long time. Bruce McGill is one of those guys. In My Cousin Vinny, he played Sheriff Dean Farley. When the film came out in 1992, McGill was 42. This year he is 76. He was born in San Antonio, grew up with a mother who worked in the arts, and a father with a very everyday kind of job, then studied drama in Texas before heading into acting. Public records show he has been married to Gloria since 1994 and has kept his private life pretty quiet, pretty steady, with very little tabloid smell to it. The most interesting thing about Bruce McGill is not scandal. It is the kind of fate Hollywood gives guys like him. GQ called him a That Guy Hall of Famer, and that sounds exactly right. Audiences remember his face from everywhere, from Animal House to MacGyver, from My Cousin Vinny to The Insider. But the industry has rarely treated him like a name that had to be placed at the very top. It is the kind of career that is both admirable and just a little bitter. Every movie gets heavier, better, more grounded because of his presence, but that very consistency is the kind of thing people start treating like it is just normal. And the price he paid was not small either. GQ reported that while filming The Insider, McGill acted in such an intense scene that he tore his perineum. Just hearing that makes you realize there are people who throw their whole body into a role, and the audience only remembers a few minutes on screen. What makes Bruce McGill so likable is that he never turned that invisibility into resentment. He just kept going quietly, solidly, from one role to the next. Not everybody can do that. That really is something to respect. Number 9, Maury Chaykin as Sam Tipton. Maury Chaykin played Sam Tipton. When the movie came out in 1992, he was 43. He was born in Brooklyn. In 1949, studied drama at SUNY Buffalo, tried to break into Broadway and did not make it, then moved to Toronto in 1974 to rebuild his career. That already tells you quite a bit about Maury Chaykin. He did not walk a straight path, and most of what he got, he had to build back up from scratch. Chaykin's private life was not loud in a tabloid kind of way, but it was not flat and easy either. Obituaries show that his first 2 marriages ended in divorce. Later in life, he lived with his 3rd wife, actress Susanna Hoffman, and their daughter Rose. The heaviest part came at the end. Sources all agree that he died in Toronto on July 27, 2010, on his 61st birthday. The direct cause was complications from an infection in a heart valve, while other sources stress that he had kidney problems in his final stretch. Maury Chaykin died pretty early while he was still working and still clearly bringing real value to the screen. What made him memorable is that he did not beat life through big star glamour. He did it through craft. From Dances with Wolves to The Suite. Hereafter, then Nero Wolfe Chaykin was always the kind of face that walked in and made the audience believe right away. And that is exactly where the sadness with Maury Chaykin sits. A man like that dying at 61 is just too soon. Number 10, Pauline Meyers as Constance Riley. Pauline Meyers is the kind of actress people could very easily glide past if they only looked at how long she appeared in My Cousin Vinny. But that is also how old Hollywood so often treated many of its most valuable faces. In the film, she played Constance Riley. When the movie came out in 1992, she was 79. 4 years later, on December the 8th, 1996, she died in Chester, Pennsylvania at 83. The biggest thing worth saying about Pauline Meyers is that her life and career were far longer than the way the public still remembers her. She was born in Ocilla, Georgia, lived 23 years in California, 12 years in New York, then her final 2 years in Chester. She made her Broadway debut in 1933 with Growing Pains, then worked across stage, film, and television for nearly 60 years. Pauline Meyers' record is mainly a record of doing the work, not a record of scandal. Her private life stayed pretty quiet with very few dramatic details, and maybe that is exactly why popular history remembers her less than it should. What I really respect about Pauline Meyers is that she did not just live off a few supporting roles passing across the screen. Archives at Johns Hopkins show that the later part of her career was also tied to the one-woman show, The World of My America, with letters, notes, and clippings stretching from the 1950s to the 1990s. To say it right, this was a woman who stayed with the craft all the way to the end and built herself an artistic life much longer and richer than most people still remember. With Pauline Meyers, the sadness is not about scandal or some loud tragedy. The sadness is that a long, steady, deeply respectable career like that often gets reduced to just a few short lines. Number 11, James Rebhorn as George Wilbur. You remember George Wilbur, right? He was the FBI expert witness, the guy who got up on the stand and made the situation Vinny had just started to untangle suddenly tighten right back up. When the film came out in 1992, Rebhorn was 44. He was born in Philadelphia, studied at Wittenberg, then got his MFA at Columbia, after that heading into New York theater before becoming one of the most dependable character actors on the American screen. James Rebhorn did not have any scandal worth talking about. The only real sadness is that his private life was so decent and his illness battle was so long. He was married to Rebecca Fulton Lynn, and they had 2 daughters, Emma and Hannah. In the obituary, he wrote himself, he called his wife and daughters the center of his life, the people who gave him the freedom to live the kind of life he wanted to live. That is a powerful detail because it shows that behind the face, people knew for lawyers, officials, tough fathers, and powerful screen characters was a man who was deeply anchored to family. The real sadness sits right here. James Rebhorn was diagnosed with melanoma in 1992, the exact year My Cousin Vinny came out, and he fought it for more than 20 years. ABC quoted his representative saying, Rebhorn kept working right up to the final month before his death. He died on March 21, 2014 at his home in South Orange, New Jersey at 65. No major scandal, no noise. Just a man who worked all the way to the end, kept his private battle very quiet, then left behind more than 100 roles and a self-written obituary that sounds more decent than most anything other people could have written for him. With James Rebhorn, that is what makes people remember him for a long time. Number 12, Chris Ellis as JT. And number 12 is Chris Ellis as JT, a small role, but one that feels very My Cousin Vinny. When the film came out in 1992, Ellis was 43. Going by this year, he is 77. Chris Ellis had a really rough early life. He grew up in the South in a world of privation and violence. Then, after moving to New York, he spent nearly 10 years barely finding work, living in bone-grinding poverty in Hell's Kitchen. He left Tennessee in 1977 with only $100 in his pocket, then fell into a stretch of professional desolation before acting finally opened up for him. That is the kind of beginning that sounds rough the second you hear it. Chris Ellis's private life turned out to be much calmer than what he went through in his younger years. IMDb says he married Crystal Lockwood Miller and has 2 children. In 2022, the two of them left Los Angeles for Harpswell, Maine, after he wrapped up an acting career that lasted 32 years. The nice thing about Ellis is that he knows exactly who he was in Hollywood. He was not the guy standing in the spotlight. He was the guy behind the guy in the spotlight, as he told Harpswell Anchor. But that is not failure. That is a very real career. From Days of Thunder to Apollo 13, Armageddon and My Cousin Vinny, Chris Ellis made a living through skill, through a face and voice that carried a very old American feel. And for an actor who started from that kind of poverty, that is a road worth admiring all by itself. Number 13, Rainer Schein as Ernie Crane. Let's close today's list with Rainer Schein as Ernie Crane. Not a huge role, but a very memorable one in My Cousin Vinny. Ernie Crane was the guy living in the trailer park next to the Sacco Suds, and the second Rainer Schein stepped into that scene, the movie got that dirt smell, that Alabama texture, and that kind of truth the best courtroom comedies really need. When the film came out in 1992, he was 50. This year, he is 84. He was born in Emporia, Virginia, with the real name Rainer Johnston, and the name Rainer Scheine was actually a play on rain or shine, which is the kind of thing you hear once and do not forget. Rainer Schein's private life has been a lot more peaceful than a lot of other people on this list. In recent decades, he has lived a pretty easygoing life in Ashland, Virginia, with Jan Dolan walking the dog, growing flowers and vegetables. That detail is worth keeping because it tells you exactly what kind of man Rainer Schein is. Not loud, not living off scandal, not turning his private life into something to sell to the public. His career followed its own path too. Theater was really the main goal, and he himself said that only after he had his theater pension did he focus more seriously on television and movies. After My Cousin Vinny, he kept staying with the work in a very steady way through Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Quick and the Dead, Trans-America Lincoln, and even Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1 in 2024. A friend of mine is a lawyer, and he once told me, this is one of the very few movies that really gets the art of courtroom argument and legal procedure so right that sometimes it even gets brought into class to teach from. Me? I am not a lawyer, and I have got nothing to do with the legal world. What I know is a whole lot simpler. This is a really great movie. This cast is just incredible. But then 34 years go by too. Some people are still here. Some have gotten much older. Some are gone. And that is always the part that makes videos like this hit deeper than you expect. It is not just about looking back at a movie. It is about seeing time pass across the very faces that used to live in memory forever.